Every empire bleeds from the same invisible vein. In every age, behind every throne, whispers trace the same pattern. Bloodlines that do not end, but coil. Their names change, their banners fade, yet beneath the skin of kingdoms, something ancient still pulses. Some call it myth, others inheritance. But the oldest chronicles tell of houses not merely noble, but possessed. Dynasties that did not rise by steel or faith, but by pacts inked in shadow and sealed in blood, not entirely human. If one listens closely, beyond the hymns, beyond the wars, you can still hear the whisper beneath the veins of the earth. It murmurs through catacombs, through royal genealogies, through the secret marriages that joined mortal ambition to something infernal. Tonight, we open the ledger forgotten by kings and burned by priests. Its pages trace the hidden dynasties, those who walked hand in hand with darkness and left their mark upon the blood of mankind. This is not history as written by victors. It is the genealogy of the damned, beyond the 13 bloodlines, the hidden demonic dynasties of earth. They say history is written in ink, but some histories are written in blood. For centuries, scholars, mystics, and monarchs have whispered of heritage not entirely human, a doctrine that claims power itself, true, lasting, unyielding power, does not descend from divine right or human merit, but from something far older and far darker. This is the doctrine of infernal heritage. It begins not with men, but with the Watchers, the fallen sentinels spoken of in the Book of Enoch. They descended upon Mount Hermon, clothed in fire, bearing forbidden knowledge. Their union with mortal women birthed the Nephilim, the giants, the tyrants, the first kings. From their mingled blood, so the legends say, came a line of rulers marked by brilliance and corruption alike. Across the empires that followed, Sumer, Egypt, Babylon, Rome, this myth resurfaced under new names. Every throne seemed to echo that ancient claim. That rule was granted not by heaven, but by the underworld's hand. The serpent in Eden became the dragon of China, the jinn of Arabia, the tempter of Europe. Each empire spoke of a pact, a seal, a covenant sealed beneath the veil of sanctity. By the medieval age, the idea had evolved into symbolism, a theology of power woven into secret orders. The grimoires of the Renaissance, such as the Ars Goetia and the Red Dragon, catalog spirits said to serve human masters of royal blood. Not all who invoked them sought damnation. Some sought legitimacy, a sign that their rule was ordained by something ancient. Kings and popes alike commissioned astrologers, alchemists, and necromancers to trace their bloodlines beyond Adam to the angels that fell. In the archives of secret societies, this notion became doctrine. The Templar seals, Rosicrucian manifestos, Masonic degrees, all layered their rituals with echoes of the infernal. Symbols of serpents entwined with crowns, skulls beneath laurel wreaths, and mottos speaking of hidden light emerging from darkness. The language of the demonic was not worship, it was a cipher for power. Even royal genealogies bore its shadow. The Merovingians of France claimed descent from a creature of the sea, the Quinotaur. The British monarchy preserved symbols of dragons, griffins, and winged lions in its heraldry. In Byzantium, emperors were crowned beneath mosaics showing not saints, but hybrid beings of fire and wing. Power, it seemed, was inseparable from the monstrous. And yet, to the historians of faith, these were myths, poetic inventions to glorify bloodlines that sought immortality. To others, they were allegories, the human attempt to explain why the powerful often act as if bound by forces unseen. But beneath the poetry, one question remains. Why does the story persist? Why do so many lineages across time and continent trace themselves not to prophets or heroes, but to the fallen and the damned? Perhaps because power itself demands a sacrifice, and myth is the language of that offering. Let us then open the ledger again. Let us trace 15 dynasties from the first fall to the modern shadows, and see how deep the blood truly runs. It begins, as all forbidden genealogies do, with light. Not the light of dawn that blesses the fields, but the ancient blaze before the first sunrise, the light that defied its maker. Lucifer, Helel ben Shachar, the morning star. In every myth where a god defies his maker, this name echoes like a fracture in eternity. He is the progenitor of the first and most enduring dynasty, the Luciferian line, the bloodline of those who seek power through illumination. They were not born from shadows, but from fire, a fire that sought to rival the sun. And from that defiance came a legacy, a dynasty of kings, sages, and philosophers who claimed descent from the light-bringer, not by flesh, but by spirit, by will, by the inheritance of rebellion itself. In ancient Mesopotamia, he was called Enki, the serpent of wisdom who defied the heavens to gift mankind forbidden knowledge. In Greece, he became Prometheus, who stole flame from the gods to ignite the minds of mortals. And in Rome, his echo lingered as Luciferus, the bright one, the torch of intellect. Always the same story, a celestial being who fell not out of hatred, but out of prideful enlightenment. Those who traced their bloodline to him were not mere rulers. They were the keepers of flame, from Nimrod of Babylon, who built his tower to touch the heavens, to the priest kings of Egypt, who crowned themselves sons of the morning. In their courts burned fires that never dimmed, and on their temples were carved the same symbol, a rising star above the coiled serpent. Through ages, this emblem became their secret mark. To the uninitiated, it meant light and progress. To the initiated, it meant defiance and dominion. It passed into the sigils of hidden orders, from the Illuminati to the Luciferian Brotherhood, where torches and triangles replaced crowns and scepters. They believed illumination was not granted, it was seized, and to seize it was to ascend. In Renaissance art, this light took on new form. Lucifer was painted not as a monster, but as a fallen prince, beautiful, radiant, sorrowful. Poets whispered that his fall was not sin, but sacrifice, that he fell so man could rise. And in that inversion, the dynasty found its modern creed: enlightenment through rebellion, divinity through self-deification. Even now, the symbol endures, the morning star gleaming on corporate emblems, the torch of knowledge raised in universities and secret halls alike. It whispers through mottos, lux et tenebris, light from darkness, the same creed that began with a single act of defiance. To some, Lucifer is the first revolutionary, to others, the first deceiver. But within the doctrine of the infernal heritage, he is the father of ambition, the bloodline that teaches man to look upward and dare to call himself divine, the Luciferian line, the dynasty of light that burns too brightly, forever standing at the edge between knowledge and ruin. Yet every flame casts a shadow, and from that shadow rose the second bloodline, born not of celestial rebellion, but of human hands. If Lucifer's descent was the defiance of heaven This next legacy was the defilement of innocence. It began not in the skies, but in the dust of the earth, with the sound of a single heartbeat silenced beneath an open sky. Cain, the first son of Adam, the first to till the soil, the first to offer the fruit of his labor to God. And when that offering was rejected, something ancient stirred within him. Jealousy, pride, the spark of defiance that mirrors his fallen ancestors. From that spark came the first murder, and from that murder the first curse, the first mark upon flesh. Thus was born the Cainite line, the marked descendants. The scriptures speak of the mark placed upon him, a sign of divine punishment that paradoxically became his protection. For God said, "Whosoever slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken sevenfold." And so the mark did not end his life. It preserved it. It made him a wanderer, eternal and untouchable. And in that wandering, legend says, he found power. From Cain's exile east of Eden came the builders, the smiths, the first architects of civilization. His descendants, Irad, Mehujael, Methuselah, and Lamech, were said to have forged the foundations of cities and kingdoms, their tools glinting red beneath the sun, as though forever stained by that first blood. Cain himself, it is said, built the first city and named it Enoch, not after a prophet, but after his own son, as if to immortalize his legacy in stone, so that his name would never wander, even if he must. To them, the ground itself became a mirror of guilt, and they learned to tame it, to master it, to build from it what they could never regain: paradise. In ancient lore, the Cainites were marked by duality, both cursed and chosen. They carried guilt not as burden, but as inheritance. Their hands built temples, forged weapons, and wrote the earliest codes of kingship. Each act of creation was also a confession, each monument a prayer for forgiveness that never came. In Sumerian myth, they appear as the first rulers who walked with the gods. In Gnostic texts, Cain is venerated, not as villain, but as victim of a tyrannical god. His defiance becomes divine in itself, a mirror of Lucifer's light inverted in mortal flesh. And as centuries passed, his name became the foundation of secret bloodlines that trace their heritage not to saints or angels, but to the first sinner. The builders of Babel, they say, were his descendants, men who sought to pierce the heavens once more. The architects of Egypt's oldest pyramids, the smiths of Tubal-Cain, whose hammers echoed like thunder in the dark, all bore the whisper of the mark. They were said to know metals unknown to other men, to craft weapons that drank light, and to shape stone with formulas lost to time. Yet within their mastery there was always an undercurrent, a reminder that their genius came from guilt. Every empire built upon their art was stained with blood. Every dynasty that rose upon their knowledge carried the seed of betrayal. For the curse of Cain is not death. It is the inheritance of conflict, brother against brother, blood against blood, power drawn from the wound that never heals. In medieval grimoires, the mark of Cain became an emblem, a crimson sigil carved on rings, etched into vaults, hidden in royal seals. Some secret societies claimed descent from him, believing his curse carried wisdom beyond human law, the knowledge that guilt could be transformed into dominion. For they believed that to bear the mark was to know both creation and destruction, to hold within one's veins the twin powers of God and devil. And so, the Cainite line endured, unseen, unbroken, and ever restless. Its symbols passed into royal houses, its myths woven into stories of builders, assassins, and kings who murdered kin for the throne. The blood of Cain became metaphor, and then, in some secret histories, it became genealogy. Even now, echoes of that mark remain, in the hands that build and the hands that destroy, in every act of genius born from envy, and every empire raised upon the bones of brothers. The Luciferian line sought light. The Cainite line sought survival. Both stand as twin reflections of the same truth, that power, in all its forms, begins not in heaven, but in the shadow of sin. And from that shadow, another bloodline waits, one that rose not from rebellion or murder, but from worship, twisted into something far more dangerous. The curse of Cain faded into the dust of ages, yet from its ashes a darker lineage rose, not of man, but of mingled blood. The ancient texts speak of them in veiled dread, the Nephilim, giants of the dawn. It began when the Watchers, those angels appointed to guard the earth, turned their gaze downward with longing. The daughters of men were beautiful, and in them the Watchers saw reflections of the light they had lost. Desire became rebellion. Rebellion became union. And from that forbidden bond were born beings that the world had never seen, children of heaven and earth, of grace and corruption intertwined. They towered above mortals, radiant and terrible, their eyes shimmering like burning suns. When they walked, the ground trembled. When they spoke, the air quivered. Their laughter was thunder, their grief a storm. These were not gods, nor men, but something caught in between, the living embodiment of divine trespass. They called themselves kings, but others called them abominations. Yet humanity, frail and fearful, bowed before their glory. Under their rule, cities rose from the dust, vast citadels of stone and fire, forged by the strength of giants. Legends whisper that it was they who first taught men the forging of blades, the summoning of spirits, and the writing of forbidden sigils upon temple walls. In those ages before the flood, the Nephilim became both builders and destroyers. They carved their dominion into the bones of the earth, raising monuments so colossal that time itself could barely erode them. The Sumerians would remember them as gods descending from the sky, the Egyptians as divine rulers with the blood of the stars. Even the Greeks, thousands of years later, would recall their echo, calling them titans. But corruption runs deep in the veins of power. Their hearts, born of divided essence, turned against both heaven and man. They devoured the offerings meant for gods. They took mortal wives by force. They enslaved those who could not resist their will. Their light became hunger. Their wisdom became pride. The old texts, from the Book of Enoch to the fragments of Jubilees, tell of their downfall. When their deeds grew unbearable, the heavens trembled with wrath. Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel descended with the storm, and the Watchers were bound in chains beneath the mountains. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were hunted, struck down by celestial fire, drowned in rising seas. The great flood was not only judgment upon men, it was retribution upon their hybrid kings. Yet, as with all things forbidden, their legacy endured. The floodwaters receded, but whispers remained of bloodlines that carried a trace of that ancient radiance. In certain royal genealogies, the symbols persisted: the all-seeing eye, the winged crown, the serpent-entwined staff, each a silent tribute to the giants who once ruled the world before history began. Some claim that fragments of their knowledge survived, encoded in the ruins of forgotten temples, buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, locked in the syllables of lost tongues. Alchemy, sacred geometry, even the hidden architecture of cathedrals, all echo faintly of their craft. And in those who seek power beyond mortal reach, who hunger to pierce the veil between heaven and earth, the Nephilim spirit still stirs, the thirst for forbidden knowledge. That is their true inheritance. They were the first to defy the boundary between divine and human, and the first to pay the price. Their bones are gone, but their memory remains, a shadow stretching across ages, whispering through every legend of demigods and fallen stars. The blood of Cain burned, the blood of the Nephilim illuminated, and then consumed. And from that ruin, a darker covenant would emerge, one that would bind flesh and spirit into endless conflict. The giants of the dawn are gone, but their light, that cursed brilliance, still flickers in the hearts of those who seek to be gods. From the ashes of the Nephilim, where divine hunger had burned itself into dust, another lineage took form, not of towering strength or radiant eyes, but of seduction, desire, and the quiet corruption of the soul. It was said that when the floodwaters receded and silence returned to the ravaged world, one spirit lingered in the shadows of human weakness, a prince not of war, but of pleasure. His name was Asmodeus, the tempter, the corrupter, the whisperer of indulgence. Unlike the giants before him, Asmodeus did not build kingdoms with stone and blood. He built them with longing. His domain was the heart, its fragile cravings, its unspoken hunger. And from his influence rose the Asmodean line, a dynasty that did not conquer through swords, but through seduction, through the slow intoxication of luxury and lust. The earliest records of his name can be traced to ancient Persia, where he was known as Ashmedaiva, the demon of wrathful desire. Later, in the Book of Tobit, he became the spirit who murdered 7 husbands on their wedding night, consumed by envy and desire for one woman. But his legend did not fade with religion. It evolved. In secret texts of medieval Europe, Asmodeus was said to have walked among kings and courtesans alike, offering counsel in exchange for devotion. And those who took his hand found that the path to glory was paved with gold and ruin. His symbol, the 3-headed crown, represented his dominion over lust, wealth, and power. One head whispered to rulers of conquest, another to priests of indulgence, and the third to lovers who mistook obsession for love. His tail, coiled like a serpent, symbolized the endless cycle of desire, to crave, to take, to fall, and to crave again. It was from this infernal current that entire dynasties of decadence were born. In Babylon, rulers drowned their people in festivals of excess. In Rome, emperors built marble palaces for their pleasures, while the empire rotted beneath them. Even in later centuries, noble families across Europe, Valois, Medici, and others whispered to be marked by unseen hands, carried the traits of the Asmodean curse: insatiable hunger for pleasure, vanity disguised as sophistication, and a thirst that no crown could quench. The stories always ended the same way: empires collapsing not under the sword, but under the weight of their own indulgence. Banquets turned to poison. Beds became battlegrounds of deceit. In paintings and chronicles, one can still trace his shadow, the faint curve of a smirk behind a saint's halo, or a serpent hidden in the folds of royal embroidery. Asmodeus did not demand worship. He demanded surrender, the quiet, willing surrender of restraint. His bloodline thrived not through might, but through contagion. Each generation infected the next with the same fever, a craving for beauty, for pleasure, for the feeling of being adored. The Asmodean heirs built their kingdoms on velvet and perfume, on the music of laughter, masking the sound of collapse. And even as centuries turned, his legacy adapted. In the modern age, the palaces became skyscrapers, the temples of worship turned into nightclubs and screens, the altars of lust multiplied, glowing softly in the dark, digital, endless, untouchable. The Asmodean line no longer sits on thrones. It walks among us in the faces of those who trade truth for attention, intimacy for spectacle, connection for control. The same demonic current that once whispered to kings now hums through neon-lit cities, in the language of temptation, in the algorithmic rhythm of desire. Lust became an industry, excess became culture, and Asmodeus, the ancient prince, no longer needs to manifest in flesh. He lives in the pulse of human want, his crown of 3 heads replaced by 3 modern idols: fame, pleasure, and power. If the Nephilim sought godhood through forbidden knowledge, the Asmodeans sought it through possession of bodies, of wealth, of souls. Their fall was not thunderous like that of the giants. It was silent, drowned in music, perfume, and wine. But the result was the same: ruin gilded in beauty. The legacy of the Asmodean bloodline endures wherever desire outpaces conscience. It is there in the collapse of great houses, in scandals that stain royal blood, in the smiles of those who wear masks, too perfect to be human. For the line of Asmodeus never died. It simply changed form, wearing the faces of every age that succumbs to its own temptation. And as one dynasty after another devours itself from within, the old whisper returns, soft as silk. Pleasure is power, and power is the sweetest sin. From the perfumed chambers of desire, we descend now into the iron halls of dominion, where pleasure gives way to pride, and the lust for control replaces the lust for touch. From the ashes of Asmodeus' decadent courts rose another, colder empire, the bloodline of Belial, the dynasty of the lawless kings. Belial, whose name means without master, was not born of rebellion against heaven, but of contempt for all authority. In the old scrolls of Qumran, his title was the Prince of Darkness and Worthlessness, yet his allure was never in chaos, but in freedom without consequence. Where Lucifer sought to illuminate, Belial sought to dominate. Where Asmodeus conquered hearts, Belial conquered wills. His symbol was the broken chain, a mark of one who bowed to none. His crown, inverted and cracked, was worn not as humility, but as mockery, proof that he alone ruled himself. And so his descendants walked the earth with the same creed, that man should answer to no God, no law, no conscience. In the ancient Near East, tales spoke of rulers who declared themselves divine, not by right of lineage, but by sheer audacity. The Sumerian tyrant who enslaved cities in the name of his own will, the Pharaoh who erased the names of his predecessors to rewrite history in his image, the Babylonian kings who believed the stars bent to their command. Each bore the mark of Belial's spirit. Their laws were many, but none bound them. They called it order, but it was tyranny. They called it strength, but it was fear refined into doctrine. And yet, in every age, this bloodline justified itself in the language of liberty. The tyrant would say, "I am free," while shackling others. The empire would cry, "We bring order," while drowning nations in blood. For this was the essence of Belial's creed, absolute autonomy disguised as freedom. When empires fell and crowns were buried, the Belial line simply changed its throne. In medieval courts, it wore the robes of inquisitors. twisting divine law into weapons of power. In the Renaissance, it took the shape of princes and popes who used enlightenment as a veil for control. By the time of revolutions, Belial's heirs no longer needed crowns at all. They wore ideals instead. No king but the self became their new anthem, the oldest lie disguised as liberation. In the modern world, Belial's dominion has become subtle, bureaucratic, global, faceless. He no longer sits upon thrones of gold, but within systems built on ambition and control. The corporations that value profit above life, the states that surveil under the banner of safety, the leaders who speak of freedom while tightening the invisible chain, all bear the Belialic mark. The lawless kings no longer rule with swords. They rule with signatures, screens, and silence. Every era has its Belials, those who see compassion as weakness and power as birthright. They do not rage like beasts, they command like gods. Their legacy is the illusion of choice, polished tyranny that makes chains look like crowns. In the shadowed archives of demonology, Belial was said to teach men how to justify sin with reason, how to make injustice look divine. And so his children learned not to defy heaven openly, but to replace it quietly, building their empires atop the ruins of conscience. The Belial line represents not chaos, but the perfection of control. Control so complete that even rebellion becomes part of the design. And just as the Asmodean heirs drowned in indulgence, the Belialic kings drown in their own sovereignty. For no man can be his own god and not lose his soul to the mirror he worships. As the centuries stretch toward the present, the voice of Belial still murmurs in the corridors of power, not a roar, but a whisper. Serve nothing, rule everything. And so, from the velvet sin of Asmodeus to the iron pride of Belial, humanity's descent continues, one bloodline feeding the next, each carrying the same unholy inheritance, the dream of freedom unbound, and the nightmare it becomes. And from that dream, freedom unbound, and the nightmare it becomes, came a deeper sound. Not the voice of man, nor the echo of rebellion, but something older, heavier. It came not from the heavens, nor from the mountains, but from beneath, from the crushing dark where light itself is devoured. There, in the black waters below creation, the Leviathan stirred. They called it the serpent of the deep, the coiled chaos before order, the devourer of all boundaries. Before crowns, before empires, before even the word king, there was the abyss. And in its depths, the seed of the Leviathan line was laid. Where Belial ruled with the illusion of control, the Leviathan ruled with inevitability. His blood was not fire, but water, patient, unstoppable, eroding mountains one drop at a time. His symbol was the spiral, the endless pull toward the center, where all things are swallowed. And those born of his current carried that same quiet gravity, the power to move unseen, to rule not by command, but by current. In the oldest myths of the world, traces of this bloodline shimmer like scales beneath the surface. In the book of Job, Leviathan is called king over the sons of pride. In Cainite tablets, he is Lotan, the seven-headed sea serpent slain by the storm god Baal. In Babylon, he is Tiamat, the mother of monsters, whose broken body became the foundation of the world. Every civilization that looked into the sea saw a reflection of the same truth, that beneath their order, chaos was alive, watching, waiting. The descendants of this current became known as the Deep Ones, not always in flesh, but in spirit, They were the masters of unseen systems, the silent architects of tides, both oceanic and economic. While Belial's heirs sat upon thrones of marble, the Leviathans ruled from the shadows beneath them, where gold flowed like rivers, and kingdoms rose or fell, not by swords, but by debts. They learned early that true dominion is not visible. It moves like water, subtle, formless, yet irresistible. The merchant houses of Tyre, the Phoenician navigators, the Venetian bankers, all spoke of knowledge that came from the sea, from those who traded with the deep. They mapped not only coasts, but human hunger, and by the time others saw the wave, it had already taken the shore. Their empires were never named, yet their reach spanned continents. The Leviathan bloodline birthed dynasties of commerce, the invisible aristocracy who learned to manipulate tides of currency, faith, and fate. In modern centuries, their symbols resurfaced in the spirals of economic power, in the emblems of global banks, in the crests of maritime corporations that controlled not armies, but entire oceans of influence. The abyss no longer needed fangs. Its teeth became systems. Its roar became the hum of global trade. And while the world slept, the Leviathan line wrapped its coils around nations, not with chains, but with contracts. In every age, prophets warned of the beast that rose from the sea. Yet the beast was not always a creature. It was a principle, a pattern, a way of rule. Wherever human greed was deep enough, the Leviathan's children swam freely. Their eyes reflected the same abyss that birthed them, dark, patient, calculating. They spoke in markets and currencies, in whispers exchanged over oceans and through wires. And even now, in the digital era, the current continues, invisible yet inescapable. The waves have turned to data streams, the tides to algorithms. The Leviathan rules through abstraction, through numbers, flows, and unseen exchanges. Empires collapse and rise again, but the deep remains, for the ocean does not die. It only changes its depth. The Asmodeans burned in excess. The Belials reigned in defiance, but the Leviathans, they endure. They are the stillness beneath every storm, the silence beneath every system, the watchers beneath every wave. And if one listens closely, far from the shore, in the hollow sound between two crashing waves, one might still hear that ancient voice, slow and cold as the deep itself. All things return to the sea. In the smoke-stained chronicles of civilization, there is one name that never fades, even when spoken only in whispers. Moloch, the Devourer, the bull-headed king, the shadow of the furnace behind every golden throne. When the Leviathan line sank beneath the depths, another bloodline rose, not from the sea, but from the ash of human hunger. It was not born of chaos, but of choice, a pact sealed by those who learned that power feeds best upon the innocent. They built the first altar in the valley of Hinnom, beneath the blazing sun of Canaan. The people called it Tophet, the place of burning. Bronze statues loomed there, arms outstretched to the heavens, hollowed so that flames could roar within. And into those arms the first sacrifices were placed. Infants, the purest offering of all, for the promise of rain, for the birth of sons, for the victory of kings. They bartered the cries of children for the silence of prosperity. But this was no mere ritual. It was the beginning of a principle, the foundation of what would become the Moloch line, a bloodline not of flesh, but of ideology. Those who learned that all kingdoms are built upon something that must be consumed. As empires rose, Moloch changed his mask. The bull's head gave way to crowns, ledgers, and marble halls. The altars became factories and boardrooms, where lives were fed into systems too vast for any man to control. And the fire never went out. It burned in the trenches of war, where the young marched into the jaws of ambition. It burned in the mines and mills of the industrial age, where children's hands shaped the engines of empire. It burned still in the quiet glow of screens, in markets that measure worth by consumption, not compassion. Every age, every nation, every dream of progress, all have built their altars anew. For the Moloch line is not a bloodline that dies. It adapts. It feeds on the innocent, redefined, not through ritual flame, but through systems of profit and control. Its symbol remains the same, a bull-headed idol, forged of desire and necessity. Fire beneath, hands extended, waiting. Look closer at the world today, at the glowing towers that touch the clouds, at the children working unseen, at the wars fought for resources we barely understand. Each one a reflection, a modern Tophet, where humanity's future is offered for the illusion of abundance. Those who carry the mark of Moloch wear suits instead of robes, yet their creed is the same. Prosperity demands a price, and so long as that price is paid in innocence, the devourer remains enthroned. But the ancient texts left a warning, a single line carved beneath the soot of time. Every age builds its own altars. Beware what gods you feed. Every civilization must ask itself how much of its future it is willing to burn for the promise of more. And when the fires of Moloch dimmed, when the smoke cleared and the cries of sacrifice faded into silence, another force stepped forward from the ashes, not born of flame, but of allure, not demanding bodies, but bending hearts. Her name has worn 1,000 crowns, Ishtar, Inanna, Astarte, Astaroth, the goddess and the demon entwined. Where Moloch devoured, she desired. Where he ruled through fear, she conquered through fascination. This was the rise of the Scarlet line. They came from the east, where temples of gold shimmered beneath the sun, and where the sky itself was thought to pulse with divine passion. In those days, the power of fertility, of love, of life itself was sacred. But over time, the sacred turned to strategy. Beauty became a weapon sharper than any sword. The priestesses of Astarte learned to bend kings to their will, not through battle, but through gaze, through touch, through promise. Kingdoms crumbled not from invasion, but from seduction. Armies were disarmed not by might, but by longing. In Babylon, they built ziggurats to the morning star, that radiant emblem of her dominion. The 7-pointed crown of Astarte shone above it, each point a virtue corrupted, love twisted into lust, grace into manipulation, fertility into control. Her symbol, once a dove, became a sigil, a star of dominion and deceit. Through her lineage, the queens of old learned to weave power into beauty. Cleopatra's charm, Semiramis's cruelty, Jezebel's defiance, all bore the whisper of the Scarlet line, a legacy of rulers who ruled not from thrones of stone, but from hearts ensnared. And as centuries turned, the cult of Astarte did not fade. It merely changed its attire. Now, her temples are mirrored towers, her altars are stages, her worshippers, millions who chase the light of glamour and the illusion of control. The Scarlet line runs through them, in every image that trades truth for perfection, in every face sold to the masses as divine, in every empire built on desire rather than virtue. The goddess became the brand, the idol, the influencer. The crown of 7 points became 7 screens glowing in the dark, each reflecting the same creed. If they adore you, they will obey you. The same fire that once burned beneath Moloch's altars now burns in the eyes of those who rule through beauty, unseen, adored, obeyed. It is not the destruction of the body they seek, but the surrender of the will. Thus, the Scarlet line endures, shimmering, fragrant, deadly. Its blood runs through the corridors of courts and corporations alike, whispering to every generation, "Let them worship you, and you shall never fall." Yet beneath all its elegance lies the same curse that has shadowed every bloodline before it. For beauty fades, and devotion turns to dust. And when the adoration ends, when the lights die, the goddess of desire always takes her due. The age of Moloch asked, "What will you burn?" But the age of Astarte asks a far darker question, "Whom will you enthrall?" And so, from the perfumed courts of the Scarlet line, where beauty ruled and hearts were bent to will, came a darker rumble from beyond the horizon, a shadow gathering behind the clouds, heavy with thunder. For the next dynasty did not seduce, it commanded. It did not charm, it demanded. Its name echoed through deserts, across mountains, and into every trembling harvest. The Baal line, the lords of the storm. Before kings wore crowns, there were those who ruled the sky itself. Baal, the Lord, the Master, the rider of clouds, was their progenitor. His presence was not gentle like rain upon a dry field. It was the terror of lightning cleaving the heavens. His was the voice that boomed through the storms, the hand that gripped both thunder and drought. In ancient Canaan, his statues were cast with horns, symbols of strength and rule. And his image stood towering above the people, a horned crown upon his head, lightning clenched in his fist. They feared him, and so they obeyed him. Every drop of rain, every ear of wheat, every breath of livestock was said to bend under his decree. And when the sky withheld its mercy, it was whispered that Baal was displeased, that sacrifice must be made to awaken his favor. So the Baal line was born, not merely of flesh, but of dominion. Their blood carried the will to control what others could not: the sky, the earth, the yield of the fields. They understood a truth far more ancient than empire, that control of sustenance is control of survival. As centuries passed, the image of Baal transformed, but his principle endured. When his idols were shattered, his name reappeared under another, Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. What began as thunder became plague. What began as harvest became hunger. And the descendants of his idea learned that ruling through storm and drought could take many forms. In medieval ages, the Baal line manifested in monarchs who claimed divine command over weather and war. The Stormbringers. Farmers would kneel before their lords, begging not for coin, but for rain. The kings understood. Fear was sustenance. The people would offer anything if they believed only the ruler's favor could feed them. Later, when thunder lost its sacred name, the Baal line found its dominion in something greater, the invisible storms of economy. Where once they controlled rain, now they controlled flow of grain, of gold, of oil, of information. They did not summon clouds, but markets. Their lightning was not fire in the heavens, but sudden collapse, the storm of scarcity unleashed at will. The Baal line learned that hunger could be reborn in many shapes. A field without rain, a market without mercy, a society trained to depend on its masters for sustenance, never seeing that the drought was crafted, not natural. And still the symbols endure. The horned crown in ancient stone becomes the emblem on modern towers. The thunderbolt, once etched in rock, now hums through power grids, stock markets, and satellites. The swarm of flies that once marked pestilence now moves unseen. Numbers, algorithms, data, devouring what is fertile, turning life into dependency. The Baal line has always thrived in the balance between plenty and panic. They are the keepers of artificial storms, the architects of fear, ensuring that mankind remains kneeling, praying for rain from hands that themselves decide when clouds shall break. And just as the worshippers once looked to the sky for mercy, today's world looks to the glowing screens of their own creation, forecasting prices, hunger, scarcity. The same dread, now digitized, the same illusion, now institutionalized. The Baal line does not roar from mountaintops anymore. They whisper from boardrooms. They sign decrees in silence while the world feels the tremor of thunder too distant to name. Yet beneath every tempest of economy, every crisis of need, the echo remains. That ancient chant rising once more from forgotten shrines. Baal reigns, the Lord of the Storm watches still, and as lightning flashes across a modern skyline, reflected in glass and steel, the truth becomes undeniable. The storm never ended. It only learned to wear a suit. Even as the storms of Baal still roll across the empires of men, in the hum of their markets, in the trembling pulse of their economies, another power moves beside it, not born from thunder, but from silence, not to replace the storm, but to govern it. From the ashes of thunder rose the Samael line, the poisoned angels. If Baal ruled through the tempest of fear, Samael reigned through the calm that followed, a silence so measured it felt divine. He was called the accuser, the angel of death, the one who stood at the edge of paradise and whispered not temptation, but reason. His tongue was not fire, it was law. His wings not of light, but of judgment. Where others used chaos, Samael used order. Where others burned altars, he built courts. He watched from behind the veil of commandments, weighing each soul in perfect balance, until even innocence began to tremble beneath the weight of procedure. In old texts, he is depicted holding a staff shaped like a serpent, a symbol of both healing and venom. That was his genius, destruction disguised as deliverance. He did not need to crush kingdoms when he could make them collapse under their own codes. And thus, the Samael line was born, the bloodline of cold intellect and holy bureaucracy. They inherited the art of control through paper, decree, and decree again. Where Baal's heirs ruled crops and storms, the children of Samael ruled records and laws. They became judges, scribes, clerics, and in later centuries, ministers, executives, and architects of policy. Their thrones were not carved from stone, but built from rules, stacked so high that no common man could see the light above them. Through them, the idea of divinity changed once again, no longer a figure to be worshipped in temples, but a system to be obeyed without question. Their creed was not chaos, but perfection through punishment. Every signature, every sentence, every verdict, a new verse in the scripture of their dominion. Ancient mystics described Samael as the husband of Lilith, the union of logic and defiance, law and lust, death and desire. From that marriage of opposites, a new breed of rulers emerged, beautiful in form, merciless in function. They believed that through judgment the world could be purified, that only by breaking what is weak could the strong remain untouched. In time, the Samael line learned to transcend religion. they became the unseen architects of the modern machine, weaving their sigils not in scripture, but in systems. Governments, corporations, surveillance networks, all the silent watchers who record, categorize, and correct. Every law written to protect becomes a weapon to bind. Every measure of safety becomes a leash disguised as light. The black sun, their emblem, rises not in the sky, but in the screens that illuminate our nights. A sun that gives no warmth, only exposure. It shines coldly through cameras, databases, and silent algorithms that know more of us than we dare to know of ourselves. In their world, mercy is weakness, and knowledge is power, measured in control. They do not rule with swords or fire, but with certainty, the belief that they alone can define what is just. Every file, every code, every classified secret, these are their scriptures, guarded with angelic precision and infernal resolve. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is that their governance feels righteous. The Samael line whispers of protection, order, safety, yet behind the mask of their perfection lies the same ancient poison. For every freedom granted, 1,000 invisible walls rise. For every light turned on, another shadow lengthens. Samael was once said to have looked upon creation and found it flawed. So his children dedicate themselves to fixing what God left imperfect, not through faith, but through correction. And thus the poison spreads quietly, elegantly, through documents, devices, and decisions. Some call it bureaucracy, some call it progress. But the old names remember the truth. The Samael line still walks among us, cloaked in authority, crowned by systems that never sleep. And when you sign your name, when you accept the rules without seeing the chains they weave, know that somewhere an unseen hand records it, a quiet, eternal ledger of judgment. The storm ended, yes, but now the silence reigns. And in that silence, Samael smiles. Even as the cold dominion of Samael weaves its laws through the world, another current, softer yet more ancient, stirs beneath it, not of order or thunder, but of silence, moonlight, and refusal. It moves where the written word cannot reach, in dreams, in desire, in the dark pulse beneath creation's ribs. This is the Lilith line, the mothers of shadows. Before the scriptures called Eve, there was her, the first woman not born of bone, but of the same dust as man, equal, unyielding, and unbent. Lilith, the one who would not kneel. Her defiance was not loud, it was steady. According to Jewish scriptures, when Adam demanded submission, she spoke the forbidden name and walked away into the wilderness, unblessed but free. And from that moment, the world began to fear what it could not contain. Her symbol is the owl, silent watcher of the night, eyes of knowing that pierce illusion. Around her shoulders, the crescent moon like a silver blade. Before her, a mirror that does not flatter but reveals. In every age, her reflection has taken new forms. Priestesses, witches, sibyls, and queens. Women who heard whispers, others dismissed, and carried knowledge that unsettled thrones. Where Samael's sons crafted laws to bind, Lilith's daughters learned the art of unbinding. They dealt not in decrees, but in intuition, the wordless currents of power that move beneath speech. While kings crowned themselves in gold, these women crowned themselves in secrecy, and from behind veils and shadows, they shaped destinies. In Babylon, she was Ishtar, descending into the underworld to face her reflection. In Canaan, she was Astarte, draped in stars and perfume, worshipped yet reviled. In medieval whispers, she was the witch at the edge of the village, accused of blood and moonlight. And in the modern age, she is the unspoken fear of power uncontained, the independent, the unknowable, the woman who answers to no name but her own. Yet this bloodline bears more than freedom. It bears loneliness. Power that stands apart must also stand alone. The daughters of Lilith walk between worship and damnation, adored for beauty, despised for agency. Their stories are retold as cautionary tales, their wisdom rewritten as madness, and so they learn to move in shadow, their strength hidden in the folds of silence. But make no mistake, their influence endures. When nations rise through diplomacy, when empires bend not by swords, but through whispered persuasion, there she is, in every secret pact sealed under moonlight, in every revolution sparked by an unseen hand. They are the counsel behind the throne, the whisper in the ear of kings, the mirror before which power trembles. Even the heirs of Samael, in all their precision and law, learn to respect this silent counterpart. For logic may rule the body of civilization, but intuition rules its soul. And when the structures of control grow too rigid, it is the shadow of Lilith that slips through the cracks and rewrites the story. In every woman who chooses solitude over submission, in every voice that refuses to be softened, in every generation that reclaims the forbidden name, the Lilith line breathes again. Their legacy is not built in stone or code, but in the courage to walk away from paradise and build a kingdom of their own beneath the moon. They are not gone. They never were. They wait, patient, eternal, in the quiet between the heartbeats of history, watching, listening, remembering. In the oldest tongues, his name meant strength of God, but in the dust of rebellion, it became Azazel, the one who taught men the art of making war. From the scorched valley of Dudael, legend says he fell, not with flame, but with purpose. His gift was not of fire or flight, but of craft, the secret of shaping earth's blood into blades. Where others offered prayers, Azazel offered technique, the knowledge to split atoms of peace and forge them into weapons. The first sparks that leapt from his forge were not of iron, but of temptation. For in every hammer's strike echoed the same whisper, "You can be stronger." It is said that he gathered men around him in the desert, their eyes reflecting the glow of molten metal. He showed them how to pull ore from the ground, how to temper, sharpen, and kill. He spoke of dominance as destiny, and of progress as the right of the cunning. And the men, enthralled, learned quickly. Their hands, once used to plant seeds, began to shape swords. Soon, smoke replaced the scent of rain. Cities rose on the bones of fallen villages, and each empire carved its name with a different blade, but all bore the same signature, Azazel's design. His symbol, the Iron Crown, passed unseen through ages, worn by conquerors, kings, and now corporations. The shape changed, but the creed remained. Control through creation, profit through conflict. In time, his bloodline became less flesh and more ideology. The children of Azazel no longer smelt iron in caves. They built machines that thought, drones that hunted, weapons that reasoned. The forge had gone digital, yet its heat never cooled. Every advancement, every revolution bore the same silent offering, sacrifice disguised as progress. The wars grew quieter but deadlier. Now the weapons did not clang or burn. They blinked, beeped, and hummed in the sterile light of laboratories. But the forge still burned, inside servers, algorithms, and coded intent. In every age, his emissaries emerge. Blacksmiths once, now engineers. Priests once, now policymakers. each convinced that the weapon is merely a tool, neutral, immoral. But the whisper returns, ancient and unwavering, forge and rule. Yet beneath the roar of industry and innovation, something older stirs, the same spirit that first taught men to make blades from the bones of mountains. It feeds not on blood alone, but on the illusion of righteousness, because the legacy of Azazel was never just war, it was purpose. To convince mankind that destruction is the price of progress and that glory is found in the ashes of the fallen. Even now his children stand on battlefields of silicon and sky. They build weapons that think faster than guilt, that decide who lives and who disappears. And in their gleaming eyes, the reflection of their forefather burns, a horned figure crowned with iron, smiling through smoke. The forge of war was never buried. It only changed its fuel. It is said that among the oldest lines, those birthed from fire, desire, and blood, none gleams with such silent cruelty as the Mammon line. Its emblem is not a beast or a crown, but a serpent made of gold, forever devouring its own tail, the promise of endless gain and endless hunger. In the forgotten cities where trade first replaced prayer, his name was whispered behind scales and ledgers. Mammon, the golden serpent, not a god of abundance, but of possession. His temple was not built of stone, but of trust turned to transaction. The first disciples of Mammon were not kings, but merchants. Those who learned that power need not roar, it could simply buy. They weighed souls as they did spices, measured worth in measures of gold dust. And when the scales tipped, they smiled, for in the gleam of profit they saw reflection, their own faces shining like idols. It is said that when the other bloodlines forged their dominions through fear, lust, or law, Mammon watched. He built empires not through conquest, but through debt, chains invisible, yet stronger than iron. He learned the secret truth of dominion, that whoever owns the measure of a man's hunger owns the man himself. In Babylon, the priests of commerce offered incense before golden statues, not in reverence, but in negotiation. In Tyre, the sea winds carried his voice between ships laden with purple dye and human cargo. In Rome, his whisper coiled around senators' tongues, gilding their decrees. And in every age that followed, the Mammon line thrived beneath banners of progress and prosperity. The blood of Mammon does not spill in battle. It circulates quietly through banks, through trade routes, through invisible markets that hum like veins beneath civilization's skin. His children are not warlords or sorcerers, but accountants of empire, shaping destinies with ink and interest. They build temples of glass and steel, where the faithful kneel not to pray, but to sign. Every document, a ritual, every transaction, a vow, and in the silent gleam of every coin, a reflection watches back, remembering. For gold does remember. It remembers every oath whispered in its gleam, promises of loyalty, of betrayal, of need. Each coin carries a ghost of the hand that once held it, a farmer's sweat, a thief's fear, a king's arrogance, a widow's tears. Through centuries, the Mammon line has rewritten morality into numbers, virtue into valuation. And so the bloodline persists, clothed not in myth, but in modernity. Their altars now glow with digital light, their sacrifices wired through silent networks. The golden serpent no longer coils in temples, it coils through economies, feeding, growing, tightening. Yet, deep beneath it all, the truth remains unchanged. For even now, Mammon's breath warms the heart of every bargain struck in desperation, every dream sold for security, every truth traded for convenience. He does not demand worship. He simply waits for the moment when value outweighs virtue. And so the serpent still eats its tail, radiant, eternal, content. Because in the end, every age finds a price worth paying. In the shadows beneath all other bloodlines lies the most silent, the most patient, the Abaddon line, not born of temptation nor greed nor lust for dominion, but of an older instinct, the instinct to erase, to burn the rot, so that life might crawl again from the ashes. Its progenitor is Abaddon, or in Greek tongues, Apollyon, the destroyer, once a watcher of order, now the warden of endings. His sigil, a swarm of locusts spiraling above a gate of iron and flame. His crown, a black key, the key to the abyss. They say his name was once spoken only when the world reached its threshold, when kingdoms had grown too proud, when temples reeked of gold and deceit, when the blood of innocents thickened the dust of the streets. Then the sound of wings would rise, not one, but thousands, like a storm clothed in hunger. And beneath that noise, beneath the trembling earth, a door would open, not upward, but down. It is said the children of Abaddon walk unseen among men, not to conquer, but to cleanse. They are the fire that follows decadence, the silence that walks after laughter has gone sour. You will find them in every civilization that has fallen by its own hand. In the ruins of Sumer, where gardens turned to deserts overnight. In the bones of Carthage, where wealth and blood were indistinguishable. In the dust of cities that once called themselves eternal. To the unwise, Abaddon is a destroyer, a demon with a locust's crown and the breath of pestilence. But to those who see deeper, he is the gatekeeper, the one who ends not for cruelty, but for reset. For even decay, if left unchecked, becomes a god. The cults that bear his mark are old, older than the temples of Baal, older than the scribes of Enoch. They gather not to worship life, but to honor endings. To them, fire is the holiest water. They anoint themselves in soot and chant before effigies carved with the key and the locust, believing that through ruin comes remembrance, that the world must be broken to remember the shape of purity. In modern times, their presence lingers still, not in caves or catacombs, but in systems, in the hand that erases history to preserve peace, in the device that burns a city so that borders can be redrawn, in the creed that promises rebirth through conflict. The Abaddon line thrives where destruction wears the mask of deliverance. Each bearer of this blood carries a paradox. They speak of salvation even as they burn the world. They dream of peace, yet leave silence in their wake. Their words are scripture carved in ash, each verse ending in a sigh. It is done. But listen closely. Within their chaos is a strange symmetry. Every ruin they leave behind becomes a cradle. Every civilization they crush becomes the soil for another to rise. And thus their purpose endures, unseen, uncelebrated, but essential. It is said that Abaddon keeps the key not to imprison creation, but to remind it that every gate must open twice, once to begin and once to end. When the balance tilts too far, when greed, vanity, and power choke the breath of life itself, the locusts return. Their wings shimmer with divine arithmetic, the mathematics of oblivion. And the key turns again. Through that yawning gate, light does not enter, it escapes. And from within rises the hymn of unmaking, 1,000 voices chanting as one, not in hatred, but in release. Let the old world burn. Let the ashes remember what the living forgot. For this is the covenant of the Abaddon line, to destroy not in rage, but in mercy, to open the pit not as punishment, but as purification. And when the last echo fades, when all that is left is smoke and dust and memory, the gate will close again, waiting, listening for the next age that forgets its lesson. When the dust of Abaddon settled and the world took its first trembling breath again, something curious stirred in the silence that followed destruction. From the blackened soil where ruin had reigned came the faint shimmer of balance, not mercy, not vengeance, but a strange, impossible harmony. That whisper would one day be given a name, Baphomet, and from that symbol, that paradox made flesh, would rise the 15th bloodline, the line of alchemical union. In forgotten cathedrals and secret groves, they described him not as demon nor god, but as equilibrium incarnate, the goat and the man, the light that burns within the dark, the twin forces forever entwined, each one incomplete without the other. His torch burns not to destroy, but to reveal, to show that opposites are not enemies, but reflections caught in opposite mirrors. It is said that where Abaddon ended, Baphomet began, that from the ashes of unmaking rose those who sought to understand the fire, to bind chaos and order into one breath. The children of this bloodline became the architects of synthesis. They built no empires of stone, but empires of thought. They whispered of a hidden equation where matter and spirit could converge, where masculine and feminine, death and birth, angel and beast, were not wars to be won, but halves yearning to reunite. In their hidden sanctuaries, they drew the circle of perfection. At its center, the sigil of the goat-headed one, torch blazing between the horns, one hand raised, one lowered. Solvet coagula, to dissolve and to join, to tear apart the false and fuse the true. They were the alchemists, the mystics, the keepers of the forbidden science, the ones who dared to think that divinity could be engineered. Through mercury and salt, through scripture and equation, they hunted the secret, how to blend what heaven had separated. They saw the human soul as a vessel, half flame, half shadow, and they believed perfection was not purity, but balance. Yet balance is dangerous, for every torch that enlightens can also blind. And as they drew closer to that hidden symmetry, their creation began to tremble under its own paradox. Some called them prophets, others heretics, but all who beheld their work felt something shift, a blurring between the sacred and the profane. It was within the veiled orders of medieval secrecy that this bloodline found its form. The Templars whispered the name Baphomet before the flames consumed their brothers. Rosicrucians encoded it within symbols no priest could decipher. Even the early philosophers of light, the seekers of the atom and the ether, carried a spark of that same flame, though they cloaked it in equations and geometry. Their secret remained the same, that all things, from the smallest element to the highest archangel, are made of opposing forces seeking reunion. That good and evil are but the rhythm of a single heart. Those who bear this blood are not destroyers nor rulers, but weavers. They walk unseen between the factions of faith and logic, between the realms of spirit and science. They speak in paradoxes because truth itself refuses to stand still. In them, one may find the tenderness of a saint and the hunger of a beast. They are the bridge between Abaddon's ruin and whatever might come after. The experiment that asks, can creation exist without division? And yet, beneath their brilliance, the danger lingers. For to hold opposites too tightly is to be torn by them. Many who sought balance fell into madness, consumed by the very symmetry they pursued. Their writings burn with insight and delirium in equal measure. They saw visions of a world where darkness loved the light, where chaos kissed order, where the serpent devoured its tail and smiled. Even now, the symbols of this lineage persist, carved in stone, etched in architecture, hidden in equations, encoded in art. The goat-headed figure with the human eyes, torch between its horns, not as a monster, but as a riddle. A reminder that all extremes lead back to the same point, the circle that has no beginning, no end. It is said that the Baphomet line watches from the margins, neither condemning nor saving, only observing. For in their creed, the end of all conflict will not come by sword or flame, but by fusion, by understanding that even the destroyer and the creator are merely two names for the same eternal flame. And thus, from the ashes of Abaddon's fire, the torch of Baphomet continues to burn, a light that belongs to neither heaven nor hell, but to the space that binds them both. The ledger closes, yet its words do not die. They linger, quiet as embers beneath the ash, whispering of those who shaped the world in shadow. From the Cainite mark, born of envy and exile, to Lilith's defiance, a hymn of forbidden freedom. From Azazel's forge, where war first learned its art, to Mammon's golden serpent, coiling wealth into worship, and Abaddon's gates, where destruction promised rebirth. Each bloodline carried a fragment of the same design, the eternal hunger to create, to control, to transcend. These were not myths told to frighten children. They were the blueprints of civilization. Power disguised as progress, darkness masked as divine order. And even now, their symbols endure, woven into empires, etched into currencies, hidden in creeds and corporations. Perhaps you've seen their marks and didn't know what you were looking at. Perhaps you felt the pulse of something ancient moving beneath modern skin. So ask yourself, if history is a body, what runs through its veins? If every dynasty was born of the same whisper, then who still speaks it today? If the veins of history truly carry this darkness, then knowing the map is the first act of light. And maybe, just maybe, your understanding of these bloodlines has already begun to rewrite your place within them. If the veins of history truly carry this darkness, then knowing the map is the first act of light. So if you've walked with us this far through shadow and scripture, don't stop now. Subscribe and keep your name within these archives, for the next revelation waits in the dark. Because in this place, truth doesn't sleep. It stirs